everyone. Welcome back. I'm Sarah Christensen from When Sages View Astrology, and we are discussing now the astrology of Verona, Italy. And the video prior, of course, is of Milan, Italy, on the season 3 Bridgerton promo tour with Nicola Coughlan and Luke Newton. So Verona has a few interesting events and dynamics that were happening in their exchanges, but also I think what we as a collective fan group or us watching that promo tour, or if we were tuning into the promo tour, would be picking up. But I think also information that would come out later about some events that we didn't know about when it was actually happening. So there are, definitely things happening in Luke's chart relative to his south node. So kind of some past things being triggered, and that will, activate his Mercury in his 7th house, and that's related to partners. And then that square with Pluto at the bottom of his chart. There's also, not just that, but at the time of the transits of that moment in Verona, Mercury was at 24 degrees of Aries, and then squaring his own natal Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn. And so to me, the moments that might be up on the balcony and he's tripping over himself and Nicola's grabbing onto him to make sure that he doesn't, have a worse fall. That's that kind of Mercury and that Uranus in his chart kind of related to accidents in the 6th house that I had talked about. So thank goodness that it wasn't anything major and it was more behind the scenes, and we really didn't learn about it till later from that interview that Nicola did. But it's kind of an interesting thing that we see it in, what was happening in Verona, but also that there was some tripping, as I had mentioned before, in the London premiere over her veil. And so to me, of course, that's all kind of symbolism to me when observing that for Luke about him trying to, figure out his path along the way, and he's going to be tripping up on some things. It's kind of very symbolic. Another thing about the Verona in Italy I think is important is the Romeo and Juliet and our collective, thoughts and perceptions around that and what that means for us each individually, and how, I know that, Romeo and Juliet is so popular, especially across the high schools and other community theaters around. And so it's a very popular story, and, the Shakespeare and what it relates to us about a tragedy. It's a tragedy, Shakespeare. And it's interesting how so many of us, relate to that and how we think about that when we think about some idealistic romance, right? And so having them go, it's perfect for the Bridgerton romantic storyline, and they're, just helping sell the show. But it's interesting that I think in the whole energy of the moment is also has nuggets for us maybe to look at and consider for how we might approach relationships with too much idealism and the romantic ideal versus romance and reality, so there's something to be said about that. And I know that that's such an interesting paradox, considering that, we're, this is about a promo tour for, season 3 Bridgerton, and that's a fantasy, right? And it's fictional characters, but played by two people who have truly enchanted fans and the public in ways that are almost undefinable in some ways, because I know of other fandoms a little bit. I love movies and entertainment like many people. Especially in my 20s, I would think I was much more into the rom-coms, I guess 20s and 30s, I would say. But we just have, I think with movies and film and some of the major things that hit the cinemas nowadays, it's just the way that it's packaged to us as well, what's going to bring people into the audience, right? I know back in the 90s, when I was in my 20s, there were so many different types of films than what we actually see today, that because things would go from cinema to a DVD, and then they would get sales from the DVDs that would, they would rent out the rentals market after. There were so many different types of ways that they would produce film that would get picked up. Might be in the theater, but if it didn't make the theater, then it made it to the aftermarket sales. So there's just an interesting interesting change up of what we get exposed to, I think, compared. So there's a lot of sweet gems of relationship type movies from the 90s that would never get made today. I just want to point that out. And I think I heard that in an interview shared by someone. I'm not sure who that shared that discussion on that, but maybe it was Matt Damon. He might have said that in an interview. Anyway, that's off topic, but it's more about like what we get to consume around romantic relationships now versus say 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So I think that's something to have in the conversation, because as times change, I mean, what will we get to see as Pluto enters into Aquarius? And it's just a different, a highly different vibe as we emerge into that era. And that is just around the corner. Pluto enters back into Aquarius on November 19th, and it will stay there for 20 some years. And Aquarius is a sign about the humanitarian, about individuals being authentic to self, but there's also something about collectively equality for humanity. So there's a lot of different nuggets within Aquarius, and I will bring those out in other videos, but I kind of want to point that out because we are kind of at an end of an era as Pluto in Capricorn at 29 degrees is stationing here soon. I think it's October, something like October 9th or something, where it stations to go direct. And then it will make its final sweep and then leave Capricorn for over 200 some plus years. So it's really an end of an era. It's a real good opportunity to reflect on the years that Pluto has been in Capricorn. You can also check out my newsletter. I recently wrote for the solar eclipse that's happening on October 2nd. And that solar eclipse gives us some insights because of what is in the positions of the planets at the moment of the planetary eclipse. This eclipse season with the Pisces lunar eclipse on September, I think it was the 17th, and then this solar eclipse on October 2nd are actually a lot of shifts going on for people emotionally, quick dynamics happening when with the solar eclipse, lots of change quickly. And, that can have people confused and wondering what's next, there's so much going on. So I encourage people to consider getting a reading if you're going through a period of time that leaves you with a lot of confusion and question marks. And most often, there can be a lot gained from having a reading to understand how those planetary transits are guiding you towards something for your own awakening to your own path and where you have opportunity. Because we all have opportunity. It's where it's going to emerge. But we also have things that we are learning. As I've been sharing, that Nicola and Luke are all, during their promo tour, opening up to something, but also going to be folding in experiences that they have to learn from as well. Kind of goes hand, that's life, right? So I think it's important to point that out because, we have the best of romance comes when we get to be ourselves, our authentic selves, and we have good communication, but it's also that there's the right combination of right timing, right? I mean, that's a huge thing when things are unfolding, and you can actually see that in your astrology when there's a better time to connect or where there's opportunity for love to emerge in the experience. So something I share quite a lot in the astrology as well. So I do that for individuals if they want to see when there might be opportunities for romance or new people to come into the life. But of course, part of that is you have to actually take action and do something about it. But you have to be inspired maybe to do so. But I think what would make your participation in a partnership interesting, it's like what you do for yourself that's fun and how you are in the world, right? So, and that's worthy of sharing with someone else. So I hope you enjoyed this video as we focus in on Verona, Italy, and, kind of taking into consideration the surprise, the engagement of the couples that surprised Luke and Nicola, the Plaza there in Verona, and just what you might think about romance and how we all have some projections, but we also receive the ideas as well from something. I kind of look at it as like the collective hive mind, like how we pick up on it ourselves, and then what we think of from our own individual point of perception and our experience, how we might frame romance, right? And Bridgerton, I absolutely think, is a part of that and there's Julia Quinn's Bridgerton, and then there's Shondaland Bridgerton, right? There's kind of two different ways that those are shared and creatively shared with us. So I hope you enjoy this video. So let's dive in and see the planetary transits happening in Verona, Italy when Nick and Luke were there promoting season 3. Thanks. Let's go. Yeah. I have Luke first, and this is in Verona. So let's see here. I'm going to take up my highlighter again. And so you can see in Verona that Mercury is still in Aries, but now look, the moon, by the time they're in Verona, the moon is in Gemini, definitely activated his south node. So it's still active. It's what they call separating from that conjunction to his south node. So it's highlighting that part of his chart. So something has been triggered, which means something has been triggered in his fixed idea about something. Okay. The south node is in Gemini. So it kind of goes in for him to kind of take a moment sometime between Milan on their travels too. So like May 9th. And I'm doing that. Well, May 10th is maybe when they're traveling, because there definitely somebody had mentioned May 11th, but I pulled it as May 10th. But that moon will still be in Gemini on the 11th, and then it will go into Cancer. So to me, it's a moon in Gemini at the beginning of Verona, Italy. Mercury is still in Aries, so we still have that. We still have Mars is definitely separated from its conjunction in his chart to Venus, and highlighting that part of his career. And also, so Venus midheaven, this is a noon chart, of course, in Italy and Verona. Then we have the sun is still in Taurus at 20 degrees. And so that the sun is really highlighting the opposition to his psyche. So there's a lot being like amplified in the tension between the Taurus, the career, the public persona that everybody's picking up on, the sexuality that he's picking up, and also then, and what else he's attracted to, because again, he's a heterosexual male. So what he projects, right? And so that's the Venus. And so it's been very active, because the Venus recently had the Mars, so it's getting activated. The passion is being activated. And then the house that's showing up very visible in 10th house career, public persona. But it's also activating this stuff at a square. So all of this is himself and other. So along the way, he is very visible, and the sensuality, the romance, and all of that, very visible. So the perception from people will be about his fixation, about the way his micro expressions are, how he shows up. And so he'll have the after effect will be a little bit sobering, because he'll realize, he'll feel sensitive to that sensitive moon. He'll feel, oh my goodness, I don't know how to, maybe not as much as I'm pronouncing, but maybe underneath it all, it builds the anxiety, right? The bigger the crowd, if he stumbles on a sentence or answering something, that increases the anxiety more than usual. But it's also then what is showing up in his face or his body language. What does he do to get back in track, or how he looks at or leans into Nicola during those times. Verona, Italy is very romantic because of the perception of being on the balcony, the Romeo and Juliet balcony, right? So it's playing into the romance, but also they look fantastic when they go down to the palazzo and they have all those couples in front of them getting engaged, right? Like that's huge. And then it's very visible, his reaction to it. He's the first person who reaches out, right? I mean, and, to connect with Nicola just physically with his hand going towards her, and then her leaning back and them, having a reaction to what they're witnessing in front of them. And then the playfulness that comes after that. But that's all in here, right? So those micro expressions, those instinctual body movements that are then getting picked up, it's on video, and everything then takes off like a fireworks, because of these planets here. And then that just then amplifies as they move in the Pluto tour towards Rio de Janeiro. As I have pointed out, Rio is a peaking moment of all of that coming together, right? The playfulness is very visible in Italy, even though there's a little bit of tension because of the Mars on Nicola's Mars, making her a little bit more, she might interrupt a little bit, right? So, but also there's passion, there's interest, but it's also maybe reminding reminding both of them as they play through the interview answers, Q&A, that what they think, what they're attracted to, it's just reminding them of their own attraction to each other, right? But there's not anything they can, in that moment, they're not thinking about that anything might act upon it in any way, because they still are in their boundaries, right? I think they're still in their boundaries, even though it's playful and that kind of thing. I don't think it moves until they get to Rio de Janeiro for some kind of more awareness. And I think there's a more of a change that's happening in Nicola for some kind of reception that would allow, like, I think, I discussed that in the Rio video. But in Verona, there is the continuation of the building of energy. Jupiter is still getting accentuated by the Uranus. Now the sun is moving towards the Uranus. And so that's going to amplify the heightened, what I call divine energy can be trauma inducing. It can, because it's too much. And that's in his career, 10th house. It's in her 4th house. So to me, it's like really liberating something that's in her, in the place where she's the most grounded. It might send her a little bit of what I call the mini earthquake. It's like, oh my gosh, how much is going on in her own feeling nature about how she feels about Luke Newton, right? So this is all over the place. So it's just kind of opening them up swiftly in ways that they probably couldn't even have fathomed, because on a closed set, doing their thing, acting, playing their parts, all the things, maybe having fun, when the cameras aren't rolling, whatever. But the promo tour is a different energy, and in a cycle that will have things open up for them that maybe they thought they had contained. Yeah. So that's happening. And so for Luke, this is Luke's chart, really opening up things dynamically. Difficult to handle that much energy too. So I think at this, we are May 10th, May 11th in Verona, maybe even May 12th. But I think by May 12th, they're heading towards New York to get to New York. So this is it's a fast-paced promo tour at this point, and it's building the energies towards New York. And at that point, I know that he's got family going to New York. There's a lot of probably things that behind the scenes are happening for the coordination of, everybody getting to New York at this point, right? And if he hasn't seen Antonia for a few days, there can be amplified energy behind the scenes, stress behind the scenes, because that's all coming. But she's still behind the scenes in New York, even though it does come through video, that connection. And again, I don't know if Nicola, how much she knew about her, or if that she was going to be in New York. I don't know how much she knew. That could have been a surprise. But she's just doing her job on the promo tour and keeping it professional. But she still has we can see that there's genuine feelings that are there, right? But it's how much in where they are allowing it to go at this point, right? Yeah, it's approaching. So the node has only been 1 degree moved it's moved like 1 degree. So from still active though. That things can be activated by movement within a couple of degrees, even after a conjunction is made. And, but the moon to me is definitely bringing something up from the past experience. So that's important to point out for Luke Newton. It's a lot, but it will be friendly because it's air. Air is friendly, but it is surfacing something from the past for Luke Newton. So at this point in time, the relationship that he has at some level, I don't know what it is explicitly, with Antonia is behind the scenes, but it's the pressure cooker now building. And I think maybe some things that are presented in Italy are starting to, agitate that connection with Antonia, and she's reacting to it and behaving in some way. But it's because Luke's 7th house, as I have said before, can show us the archetypal energies of other people that he is committed to in some way. Okay. Commitment to Nicola as a co-star, Nicola as best friend, but best friend can also be 3rd house and 11th house. And also Antonia, on some level, she's, in the picture for him, whether he's claimed her or not, she's participating in events behind the scenes by being there. So, and she's connected with his family. So there's enough of a relationship where he's done that, right? But it's the combination that he has with her, Antonia, and Antonia being connected to the friend circle. There's something about that dynamic that to me has the core around karmic wave breaking stuff, in addition to how it breaks for Nicola on June 12th, and maybe something that was said by Nicola and Dumois. That's Nicola speaking to how she judges him. I mean, she's like, no, they don't have anything good to say, so why would I, something like that. I don't have the exact quote, but I mean, definitely there could have been, and there's a perception of that there could have been like a backlash towards Nicola, and this was the way it played out to sabotage. That's a total potential. I don't know how that links up with Dumois and Antonia. I have no idea about that. That is a very strong potential, but it's her being present and then it's being leveraged that way, and then the fallout. So it is possible that there's a connection between Antonia and Dumois, or her mother and I don't know explicitly, because that's all hunches, but not explicit receipts on that, right? So I would say that there's a potential based in the combination of the energies that they're playing a part to bring the karmic wave forward for Luke to then navigate that bigger chunk of his transformation around themes. Okay. And it's Mercury. Mercury has a past life thing that he's trying to unravel, and it has to take a certain shape for him to see it. But interesting, I also think the feral activity of the fandom in some cases, like some of the activities that are done in the fandom, not only in this situation towards, in June 12th, when they're in London and the fallout from the Pat pictures, but it's also related to how the collective of people behaved towards Jade and how that went down. Yeah, I mean, it's a theme I think Luke will have to figure out, because there is like this the way that his Venus is in his chart and the way that his Mars is in this chart. His Mars is like trying to find security in some way, but then it just goes haywire. That square is so potent for his transformation, but it's a transformation by going through maturity, by how he uses technology, how he engages with technology, the perception of others, the perception of his public persona. That's the Venus. In his career, because that's his career house, is Taurus. Okay, his sexual, him as a human being, he has a sexuality, what he puts out there. But it's okay to express your sexuality. It's how do you be safe after you're that famous, right? The things and steps that you have to take to minimize the hurt that can be caused because of it, right? And there has been certain activities in the fandom that are highly questionable in the behaviors, right? Because of how they act through social media and what gets picked up in the interest. But it's truly him having an awareness about that kind of energy, right? That from the crowd, which causes anxiety, but at the same time, he has to use his Mercury, use his intelligence to shape what it's going to be, to control it, but it's difficult to control something when a outer planet like Uranus is liberating the top of the chart. The career is going through the roof, but once Uranus gets into Gemini in 2026, I think it's June or July, then he will have a huge liftoff of the intensity of those dynamics from his 10th house. He will have a new dynamic of the Uranus opening up lots of lessons and understandings about how he communicates in relationship. He'll have a whole nother level to like wrangle with, but he'll have it in a place where it'll be easier for him to, in some ways, to work with it, because of his sun being in an air sign and his Jupiter being in an air sign, and having that air, being able to work through it a little easier he will understand that who is in that place of other has such an impact on how he's perceived, right? So if he doesn't end up completely with like a committed relationship with Nicola, and he has another partner in the future, the same kind of dynamics can play out. And so it's how strong they are and be able to hold that zone with the way media is, or the way social media can go off in huge tangents and be feral. right? Like he'll understand the psychology of that. If he's not, he's learning it, and he learns how it transformed him and how he is at home and how he is in his private life. He will go through a massive transformation about what he is behind the scenes, right? So that's really important to point out. What else I want to point out here for Verona? I think I talked about him tripping, and to me that is maybe the moon and also the Mercury. Yeah, but it's even Mars, the accidents. Where is, I don't know if that, let's see here. It could be that the Mars is close to his midheaven, like maybe his midheaven is like more like 7 or 8, and that's getting activated by that Mars tripping right over it. So that could be the case. But it could just be the Uranus expressing again that energy, and that's what physically shows up, because he kind of stumbled more than just in Verona up on the balcony. He also stumbled at the June 12th premiere. I noticed that in somebody had taken a video of him. Maybe it was Tiff. I don't know whose video it was. Had taken a video of him at the premiere, and it was on, I don't know, maybe it was either on TikTok or Instagram. I don't know which one. Maybe in somebody's stories, but there was a little video of him tripping over Nicola's veil that she had showed up with the London premiere. So to me, that was like a telltale for me. It's like, oh, he's tripping over her veil. And that sent me into like, what's going on? Because that to me was like an omen. And it just totally got me really perked up in that moment. Like, ooh, this is, that to me is a telltale sign. And it to me, it was like a precursor for what was about to happen. So some people might not pay attention to that stuff, but when you have that kind of moment, tripping on the veil and her being like the goddess, it was like him tripping over that a little bit. So, but it's the whole Eros and Psyche symbolism and archetypal imagery, and Aphrodite is a part of the myth with the Eros and Psyche and the role that she plays. I think it's so interesting to kind of have those moments where you catch something like that, and then that gets you excited about exploring a particular theme of sorts. And that really triggered me into like, oh my goodness, something's really opening here, and I could feel it. It was like automatic. Anyway, it's almost like, because of the Saturn and the Neptune in Pisces that's been happening for quite a while, since March of 2023, Saturn went into, I think it was March 7th of 2023, that Saturn went into Pisces. And I believe that just started amplifying the illusions that can be created and their power and the imagination of things. And it's great energy for art, great energy for music to take shape, because you have to have the skill to create such things, right? And the other side of the Pisces is Virgo, and Virgo is the details, the writing that go into something that's so exquisite in the imagination that comes out, right? So I want to point that out. Also, at the noon time, the Ascendant was in Leo, and then it's squaring. So it's opposite his Mercury, but then it's amplifying. So it's creating this square again. So it's such a huge amount of tense energy on his chart, amplifying transformational moments, moment to moment during this promo tour, that it will take a lot of time for Luke Newton and Nicola to integrate everything that they were picking up on during the promo tour. It can take, for Pluto stuff, it's 18 months plus. And Pluto by transit is definitely activating this part of the chart, definitely activating his moon, definitely activating his ascendant from an opposition. So it's even greater like karma moment for Luke. And for Nicola, the Pluto by transit is sitting on her ascendant, I believe. And so I believe that that's going to take her about 18 to 24 months to kind of see it start to settle in, what her trajectory had, what this all set in motion for her. And other things that she comes to know about herself from these moments. It'll take time. It takes time to like, oh, that was such a wild ride. That was a rodeo. But she will be in a new position of fame. He's also growing in fame. He's definitely had some difficulties that have to get massaged out over time, that he steps into more maturity. And I think absolutely he's in the season 4 and in the season 5. But again, what other projects, what other things? He's done some theater. He did The Shape of Things, something like that play, but he'll have more. And so it'll be interesting to see what that transformation, how it takes shape in his life, what he shows us from that. I'm very interested. He's a very interesting person. So let's see for Nicola. And here's Nicola's chart for Verona, Italy, just to quickly go over her chart as well. As I discussed, the Taurus energy lighting up the bottom of her chart. She's probably feeling really good because of all that energy coming to her moon. I mean, but there is Uranus again, even though they have the amplification, it's like little earthquakes going off in the roots of yourself and, your perception, but you're feeling and you're good about yourself. You're in the images. You're feeling good about what's being presented. The top of her chart is this is the way the public will perceive her in career, because she's got a 10th house by whole sign in Scorpio, and that's a very strong Mars and Aries that will give that shape. But she's going through massive transformation at the same time. And Scorpio, top of her chart, that Scorpio, Pluto, that Scorpio in transit is building towards the square to that. So she will have another moment of massive transformation by the time that will be several years into the future. But when Pluto is in about 8 degrees and 9 degrees and 10 degrees of Scorpio, she'll have another transformation of her self-identity. Okay. And that'll be like several projects into the future, right? So what other interesting projects she will bring into what we see, and then how that shapes her as a person. What did she do publicly and bring forward? But we also have this is a nodal return. This period of time is a nodal return. So it's a huge arcing, significant moment of the life, and how she speaks, what's perceived, her sense of humor, all these things about communication. And I love that she has one perception that's in the public eye that she gives by how she interviews, her sense of humor, what she gives to us. But it's also at the same time of these interviews, or around the same time, she has purchased a book to learn more about how to communicate in her personal life for relationships. So I think that's important, because it's like there's one that we see that is instinctual. She gives because she's got the sense of humor. She's got a professional image she's created, and she's operating in that zone and being transformed by it as she does it. But it also, on the personal level, the very personal side of her is going through a massive, massive transformation at the same time. Something's being liberated that's not been considered before. And I think that is the sensitivity of what she wants for the future of her personal home life. She has to think about the past relationships because of what she's learning along the way, right? And at the same time, having to go through a lot of personal transformation about what I'm learning, then how do I project myself into the world? How am I, what do I take from that? And then how do I share myself to the world? It'll be different than it was before, right? So what else is significant? Because when you have like Uranus down here is like the major outer planet transformation for her. We also have Neptune that's been highlighting her second house of opportunities and assets and income, and her self-worth, self-confidence. And Neptune has had like an amplifying effect of the consciousness of this part of her chart, but Saturn is like still trying to hold some of the feelings in a boundary, but it's amplifying this struggle of friendship. There's a struggle with that friend. Saturn square Saturn, transiting Saturn squaring. So there's a lot of feelings that are getting stirred up because of this relationship. It's a professional relationship, but it's also a friend relationship. Someone to spend a significant amount of time with, both professionally and personally, and how that is going through this really edgy moment. Okay. In Verona, the fact that she had to like hold on to him so he didn't fall off the darn balcony is just, golly, come on. So it's almost physical action of like holding on to him so he doesn't take a tumble. But then he, in the future, on June 12th, trips over her veil. So he's stumbling all over the place. And Nicola's like, I gotcha. And I gotcha, but at the same time, having to also check in on herself, like, okay, I'm going to have to get better how I communicate. I have to be more thoughtful about how I let the rhythm of the cadence of the conversation happen so the other person has a chance to speak their full thought. When you have fire energy that she has all the fire energy. The element of fire is Aries. Element fire, Leo, is her 7th house. So Luke is more the 7th house person here. But she has the amplification of the energy that he's attracted to in all this part of her chart. Like how she speaks, her comedic timing, that's just such an attractive beam, and being herself. No excuses, being on the world stage as a almost like a diplomat for foreign things happening in the world, and having a Uranian, she has what I call a Uranian lifestyle appeal. She has friends of all different shapes and sizes, all different walks of life. She has such an array of interesting things that come through all that way she shares herself. Her Venus is, lifestyle, playfulness, adventure, and what she enjoys. But the Saturn is the responsible part that also shows up. And that also speaks to her father and the role that he played in her life, right? Saturn. But Sun is also a part of that as well, right? Father figures often have the Sun, and the Saturn is something we can look at in their symbolism in someone's chart. And the Saturn, was significant in how it shaped her as a Uranian Aquarian figure because of her social, she speaks to social issues so often. She's, that's just a part of her, what she's sharing with the world. And she does it very, she's working the collective in a way that the group consciousness in a way that's like, we can be better. Let's just, what she stands for. Her philosophy is quite visible in what she stands for. Okay. In Verona, throughout the tour, she was wearing her pin for Gaza. And I think that's incredible that even though she got heat for it from some people, it's like, well, that could be damaging or whatever. And she's like, I'm doing what I'm doing. And she just, that to me is extraordinary for her to hold her position and hold what she believes and puts it out there in the world. So that's the strength of her character. That's the integrity of a Capricorn sun, Capricorn Mercury as well. Okay. Though, because her Mercury squares her nodes, this is one I have not really talked about that much. And the node, she's in a nodal return. We're going to have the seep through things sneaking out and becoming more visible. But I also think it's a moment that she's going to start registering some ways that she communicates, the style or the perception of things, not just from her own communication, but how something from somebody else might be communicated and how that, but it's also her Mercury is square the nodes. So it has something to learn and to gain from the process of that through all her experiences. When Mercury square the nodes, it has like have to go to the past to get to the future of where it's going for, what it's going for in its evolutionary transformation. So there's a lot going on with her Mercury, and her Mercury is responsible for her Chiron that's in her 5th house of creativity. So the wounds that are sitting there, but also the Virgo in her chart, the values of other people, the critical things of other people. But also remember her psyche, her fate, vertex angle is in Virgo, in her 8th house of other people's values, but it's also the place of the occult. So the more she learns about the mysteries from astrology that she might gain and depth psychology that go together, the mapping of the psyche kind of thing, she's going to gain a lot of wisdom about this because that is a Mercury in her unconscious mind. So she can get to that a lot faster through astrology, to be honest. Astrology is one of the fastest ways to get to the things that are tripping you up. And then to go, okay, now I've got a visible symbolism for it. This is what my experience have been. Look at the patterns. And then how do you start course correcting? Then how do you start evolving that thing to move towards being more expressive? I mean, think about a past life that had a relationship, maybe a relationship with someone from a different country, and then how that didn't go well, but it was a friend because the Venus is in Sag. Maybe they traveled and then it didn't go well. And that's what the thing that because it didn't go well and then something ended. So it's like an uncompleted, and it was an emotional block. So it comes back, the person comes back. It's like, I'm going to work on these things. And so it kind of sets up the things like, see, she stumbles over the ability to communicate in a relationship, like in a committed relationship. And then how that then starts to iron out, like, this is what I'm going to do. I have to really strive to communicate well. I have the means to be very direct, but some people can't receive things very direct. It has to be a little bit softer. So you start learning how to bring in humor, bring in things that can soften it, but still communicate. But use your Aries Mars, very strong Aries Mars when you have to. But understanding the power of the instinctual mode to communicate. So that Mercury is such a key planet. Her Sun is also a key planet in her transformation of herself. So it requires another person to help that bring it forward. That's the Sun. That's the essence. But the Sun is square the nodes. So it's very, very important for how she receives and understands the other person. And in a heterosexual relationship, it would be, how do I perceive what they're communicating from me? One of the biggest things I learned post-divorce, my first marriage, was what I did not understand about the communication of that partner in my life at that point in time. I had no clue. I would say I had a terrible model of a parent of, what that looked like from my father figure, my father, and what I was raised, my experience in my family of origin, and what I had as an example. I had no clue of what it meant, how to communicate, really, beyond being in love with someone and the fascination with someone and being playful. And then we got married, but then you add in the complexity of doing the responsible things of adult, and you add a child into the scenario, and then it's like the communication breakdown and then if you have any kind of conditioned trauma from childhood, how that comes in and just can completely destroy the whole thing that you've built, because you don't know how to work with that combination of stuff coming up to be healed. It's true. So by taking an action to learn how to communicate early, as you're trying to connect, trying to make a relationship happen, that is yay. Celebrate that, because that's someone who's putting in the effort to make the transformation happen. I hope that makes sense. This is, definitely in Nicola's chart. I think she's fantastic. And there's a strength of a woman who shows up professionally, but it's like a professional woman also wants to have the private life, the personal life that's also successful. And what is that? I mean, sometimes when you have maybe made it in your professional life and you continue to make successes happen in your professional life, but you've got like a weakness in the way you communicate, articulate yourself for a private life, a personal life. That's where you have to kind of start educating yourself and understanding your psychology and how you are through the interplay, and what you're receiving, and how you set expectations, and what the attraction is, and all of those things. Because once you start mastering those skills of how you communicate and being a good listener and a good how that comes together, then that will set up for more success in your relationships. So hopefully that makes some sense about what was happening in Verona, Italy for Nicola, because she's definitely communicating. She's learning about some subtle cues. She's learning about traction. They're playful, but it's definitely the ramping of learning about the volume of interest that continues to pick up as they continue on the promo tour and as they get towards the launch, because this is pre-launch of the show for season 3, and what that is going to take off. So and continue their trajectory, and definitely what other things she's going to be picking up on. I also think around this time she was doing Big Mood promo somewhere in here. I don't have the exact dates on that, but that is definitely part of her equation, because they were overlapping a bit between Big Mood and Bridgerton's. I think there was some Big Mood stuff that was happening before the Bridgerton series in New York. So anyway, I hope that has been helpful and gives a good sense of what was going on in Verona, Italy. And I think that covers everything. Yeah, because the next one was Rio. So I hope you've learned a lot about what was happening in Verona, Italy between Luke Newton and Nicola Coughlan. If you have any questions, comments, please share them below. I love to have your comments. I love to have your insights and what you might have learned, and maybe you picked up on something else in this sharing. And you can always contact me by contacting me either on the community page here on YouTube or on my website, onesagesview.com, or I'm also on Instagram at onesagesview. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day. Bye now.